When I was 10, my family moved from a small, run-down house in rural Pennsylvania to a massive home in Maryland. Our new backyard was incredible. The best part? A towering, multi-level treehouse built into a cluster of tall pines. My brothers, Sean and Harold, lost interest quickly, but for me, it was a dream come true. It started innocently. One day, I climbed up to the treehouse and found a note. "Hi, I'm the Marshmallow Man. What's your name?" The handwriting was large and messy, like a kid's. I thought one of my brothers had left it to mess with me, so I played along. Every day, I'd leave a reply, and the next day, a new note would appear. At first, the Marshmallow Man asked harmless questions, what I like to do, my favorite snacks. But soon, the questions grew strange. What time do your parents go to bed? And do you sleep with your window open? I still didn't think much of it. Kids are naive like that. But one morning, I woke to something that made my stomach drop. My bedroom window was covered in marshmallows, each one taped neatly to the glass. I told my parents, but they brushed it off as a prank. That night, I stayed awake, heart pounding with every creak of the house. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint tapping on the window. Terrified but curious, I pulled back the curtain. A man was standing there. He was old, with patchy hair and a grin that stretched too wide, showing blackened teeth. He pressed his face to the glass and whispered, "Hello." I screamed, and my parents came running. By the time they reached my room, the man was gone. The police found footprints leading to the woods, but no sign of him. For years, I tried to forget, but last month, while packing for a move, I found a note tucked into an old box. "Miss me? Let's play again." My son, Luke, was 8 when he started talking about Jake, his imaginary friend. He said Jake lived in the treehouse at the edge of our property. At first, my wife and I didn't think much of it, but soon, Luke started spending all his time up there, bringing food and old clothes. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said, "Jake needs them." One day, curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed up to see for myself. Inside, I found piles of dirty socks, tattered sneakers, and wrappers scattered across the floor. Drawings covered the walls, foxes, bears, and spiders with human-like faces. When I confronted Luke, he whispered, "Jake doesn't like it when you talk about him." That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I glanced out the window and saw movement near the treehouse. It wasn't Luke. It was a frail, sickly boy climbing down the ladder. I bolted outside, yelling for him to stop. He turned, and for a moment, our eyes met. His face was pale and sunken, his clothes filthy and torn. He disappeared into the woods before I could reach him. The police searched but found no trace of the boy. When they questioned Luke, he revealed something chilling. Jake wasn't alone. He lived with others, friends he called the animals. Jake wanted Luke to leave his family and join them in the woods. 2 nights later, we woke to a scratching sound at the back door. When I opened it, I found muddy footprints leading back to the treehouse. A single note was nailed to the door. "We're waiting." When I was 12, I was what you might call a rebellious kid. I'd fight with my parents over the smallest things, chores, grades, you name it. On those nights, when arguments got especially bad, I'd grab some blankets and storm out to sleep in our treehouse. It was my own little refuge, a place where I could sulk without being bothered. One particular night stands out in my mind more than any other. I'd just had a screaming match with my dad about some bad grades on my report card. In my teenage angst, I decided I hated everyone in the house and headed to the treehouse for the night, carrying a flashlight and my beloved Nintendo DS. The treehouse was my sanctuary. Perched high among the branches, it was far enough from the house to feel like I was in another world. I settled in, wrapped myself in a blanket, and played Animal Crossing until my eyes grew heavy. At some point I must have fallen asleep, but I wasn't asleep for long. I woke suddenly to the sound of a voice, a deep, gravelly voice calling my name. Tommy, Tommy, are you up there? At first, I thought it was my dad, maybe feeling guilty for yelling at me. But something about the voice wasn't right. It was slower, raspier, and off. Tommy, come down here. I need to talk to you. I froze, clutching my blanket tightly. My flashlight was off, but the moonlight streaming through the treehouse window provided just enough illumination to see the ladder leading up. Then I heard it, the sound of creaking wood as someone started climbing. My heart raced as I watched the shadow of a figure slowly rise into view. I couldn't make out their face, just the outline of their head and shoulders. "Ah, there you are," the voice said, almost gleeful. Panic set in. I stumbled backward, knocking over my DS, and yelled, "Dad! Dad, help!" The figure froze for a moment before retreating down the ladder. I crawled to the window and screamed as loud as I could, desperate for someone to hear me. Seconds later, I heard the back door slam open, and my dad came running out with a flashlight. By the time he reached the treehouse, the figure was gone. We searched the yard and the surrounding woods, but we found no one. My dad thought it was a prank or a bad dream, but I knew better. The next morning, I returned to the treehouse to grab my DS. That's when I saw it. A long, rusty knife stabbed into the wooden floor. Carved around it were the words, "Next time, you won't wake up." My parents called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. I never slept in the treehouse again. To this day, I can still hear that voice calling my name in my nightmares. During fall break, I stayed at my parents' house. One chilly evening, I climbed into the treehouse to enjoy the quiet. As I sat there, I noticed movement in the yard. 3 hooded figures were circling the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. My heart sank as one of them picked the lock and slipped inside. Another stayed outside, pacing the yard. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering my location. As I did, the lookout turned and stared directly at me. He yelled to the others, and before I could react, he started climbing the ladder. Panicking, I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a glass jar, and threw it at his head. He fell, but within seconds he was climbing again, faster this time. I screamed that the police were on their way, hoping to scare him off. He froze for a moment before retreating. Minutes later, the police arrived, but the robbers had already fled. 2 days later, my parents found a note in the mailbox. "We saw you. Next time we'll finish what we started." Years after leaving my childhood home, I returned to visit my parents. It was strange being back after so much time away. The house felt smaller, quieter, and eerily still. One afternoon, I decided to revisit the old treehouse. It had been years since I'd climbed up there, but as I looked up at the weathered boards, memories of childhood adventures came flooding back. The climb up the ladder felt unsteady. Some of the rungs creaked ominously, but I made it to the top. Inside, the treehouse looked just as I'd left it, but with one disturbing difference. There were signs that someone had been living there. In one corner was a tattered blanket, folded neatly. Nearby, I saw empty cans of food, a plastic water bottle, and a pair of muddy boots. My stomach churned as I realized these things weren't old. Someone had been here recently. I climbed down quickly, a growing sense of unease settling over me. That night, as I lay in bed at my parents' house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Around midnight, I woke to a strange sound, footsteps on the roof. At first I thought it was a raccoon or some other animal, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy boots pacing back and forth. Terrified, I called out to my dad. He grabbed a flashlight and ran outside to investigate. By the time he got out there, the footsteps had stopped. There was no one on the roof, but we found something far more chilling. The ladder to the treehouse had been moved. It was now leaning against my bedroom window. The next morning, we called the police. They searched the area but found no evidence of an intruder. For a while things were quiet. I convinced myself it had been a one-time incident, a vagrant passing through. But a week later, my parents woke to find something horrifying on the porch. A blanket draped over the swing, exactly like the one I'd seen in the treehouse. Beneath it was a single note, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "The treehouse is mine now. Stay out, or else." I begged my parents to move, but they refused, convinced it was just a harmless prank. I haven't been back since. Every now and then I'll get a call from my mom about strange noises or things being moved in the yard. I don't know who or what is living there now, but one thing is certain, the treehouse no longer belongs to us.